You saw nothing. Understand me? The doctor said this while holding a blood-soaked glove and looking straight into my eyes. My name is Ryan, and I worked as a night shift janitor in Westlake General Hospital. I was not a doctor, and I was not a nurse. I was just the guy who cleaned the floors and carried the heavy bags no one else wanted to touch. The morgue was the place they sent me on my very first week, because no one liked going down there. They said it was quiet and easy. They said I would get used to it. They said death becomes normal after a while. They were wrong. The morgue was always cold and always too silent. Every sound echoed. Even the wheels of the stretcher made it feel like someone was dragging chains across the room. My job was simple. Wipe the tables, empty the bins, mop the floor, make sure the freezers are locked. That was it. Nothing special. Nothing heroic. Just routine work that most people would never want. At first, I convinced myself I was lucky. I needed money. The pay was better at night. No one bothered me. I kept my head down and finished my shift. I tried to ignore the things I saw on those metal tables. Bodies from accidents. Bodies from the ER. Bodies that arrived without families. I tried to treat it like any other job because I had no choice. But the hospital had a strange rhythm at night. Odd footsteps in empty hallways. Carts rolled when no one was pushing them. Doctors who come in at hours they should not be working. I kept seeing the same surgeon showing up long after the rest of the staff had gone home. He brought bodies without tags. He locked doors that were never supposed to be locked. Everyone acted normal around him, but no one ever stayed near him for long. I told myself not to get curious. I told myself I was imagining things. I told myself that a janitor should never question the people above him. Then the night came when he looked straight into my eyes with blood on his glove and told me those words. You saw nothing. And that was when I knew my job was about to ruin my life. The morgue at night never felt like part of the hospital. It felt like its own world. The halls outside were silent, so quiet that even a distant elevator door sounded like a scream trapped behind metal. Inside the morgue, everything echoed. My footsteps, my breath. Even the small click of my cleaning spray bouncing off the walls sounded too loud to be normal. The metal tables were always lined up in perfect rows. Cold, clean, empty until they weren't. The surface looked smooth, but when the lights flickered, it reflected shapes that made my heart jump. Sometimes I felt like the shadows moved before I did, as if something was already waiting there. The air never warmed up, not even for a second. At first, the bodies scared me. I kept thinking one of them would move or sit up or open their eyes. But after a few months, death became normal, like it was just another part of the shift. I could clean around a body while eating a sandwich without thinking too much. I learned to ignore the blue lips and the stiff fingers. I learned to pretend that the room wasn't filled with what used to be people. But sometimes I remembered them. A burned man whose skin peeled like paper. A woman with glass still stuck in her hair. A teenager with half his face missing from a crash. These flashes came out of nowhere and stayed in my mind long after the shift ended. They hid in the corners of my memory like someone whispering in the dark. Bodies normally came in during the day, but for some reason, the night shift began seeing more and more arrivals. Odd hours. 4 in the morning, sometimes 5. No explanation, just a quiet knock on the morgue door and a stretcher sliding in. And the same doctor brought them. He never smiled. He never talked more than needed. He walked like he was always in a hurry, but his face was calm. Too calm. Every time he showed up, he held paperwork in his hand, but never gave it to me. He just said, "Stay back," in a low voice, like a warning or a threat. Then he rolled the bodies away before I could ask anything. There were no tags on the bodies he brought. No names, no times, nothing. Just zipped bags that looked brand new, as if they came straight from somewhere else. I started noticing small things that made my stomach twist. Once, I saw him wipe something from his sleeve. Not blood. Something thicker, darker. He glanced at me and his eyes narrowed as if he knew I saw it. He didn't say a word, but the look alone felt like a hand around my throat. Another time, a freezer door opened by itself. I heard a soft click, then a slow slide. I turned around, and the drawer was a few inches open. Inside it, a body bag shifted. Just a tiny bit, but enough for my heart to drop. When I looked back up, the doctor was watching me from the other side of the room. His face was blank, but his eyes said something else. Something dangerous. One night, I heard a soft sound behind me. A heavy breath, a quiet shuffle. When I turned, nothing was there. But the next morning, a new body had appeared on the table. One I never heard being rolled in. Small things kept happening. Not enough to call it danger, but enough to make me feel like the morgue was hiding something from me. And that doctor became the center of every bad feeling I had. He moved like someone carrying a secret that did not belong to him. He worked alone. He worked silently. And he always showed up when no one else was around. I told myself it was just a strange routine. I told myself I was overthinking. But deep inside, something whispered to me. The first red flag came on a night that already felt wrong the moment I walked in. The air was heavier than usual, almost sticky, like the room itself was sweating. I tried to ignore it because night shifts were always strange. The knock on the morgue door was soft, almost scary. When I opened it, no one was there. But a stretcher waited in the hall, pushed up against the wall like someone had rolled it over and disappeared. The wheels were still shaking. That told me someone had run away fast. The body bag on the stretcher looked new, too clean, too smooth, like someone wanted it to look normal. I pulled it inside and zipped it open because I needed to tag it. That was my job, nothing more. The moment I opened it, the cold room felt even colder. The skin was warm, not a little warm. Warm like the person had been alive minutes before. I pressed my fingers against the neck and felt heat trapped under the skin. My hand trembled without me meaning to. Every body I had ever touched in this place felt like ice. This one felt alive. A small drop of blood slid down the side of the torso. Not dried, not old, fresh. It was so fresh that it left a bright red trail on the silver table. I stepped back because my stomach twisted in a way I had never felt before. There was no reason blood should still move like that. When I looked closer, I noticed the chest. A stitched line ran straight down the middle, neat and clean, like a surgeon had opened it and closed it in a hurry. The skin around it looked stretched and swollen. I lifted the edge a little, and my breath froze. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. I leaned closer, slowly, carefully, almost afraid to see more. The skin around the opening was still warm, fresh, too fresh. Then I saw it clearly. The heart was gone, not damaged, not bruised, not torn apart like something violent had happened. It had been removed, cleanly, precisely. The inside of the chest looked almost empty, hollow, as if something essential had been scooped out. A chill crawled up my spine. It felt like the body wasn't fully dead yet, like something had been taken from a living person. My stomach twisted. My mind tried to reject everything I was seeing, but I couldn't look away. The emptiness inside that chest didn't just show a missing organ. It showed a message, a warning, a sign that someone in the hospital was doing something far darker than I imagined. And as the cold air brushed against my neck, I swear I felt like someone was standing right behind me, watching me discover the truth. The tag on the toe said natural causes. I forced myself to step back and breathe. I told myself it was not my business. I told myself I was here to clean floors, not investigate doctors. But the part of me that had survived months inside the morgue whispered that something was wrong, deeply wrong, and if I ignored it, I would regret it later. I tried to focus on my work, but my hands shook each time I wiped around the table. It felt like the body was watching me even though its eyes were closed. Every sound in the room grew louder. The dripping noise, the hum of the freezer, the soft buzz of the lights. Then I heard footsteps. Slow ones, heavy ones. They came from the hallway behind the morgue, the one that stayed locked at night. I froze. The sound grew clearer, each step pressing against the floor like someone was walking right toward me. But when I turned around, the hallway was empty. No shadows, no movement, nothing. A sudden slam echoed through the room. A door had shut, hard, somewhere behind the storage area. The sound bounced off the walls and made my heart jump. I rushed to check. But every door was closed and locked. No one was inside. No one should have been there at all. That was when I noticed something else. The stretcher that had brought the body in was facing the opposite direction. I had left it pointed toward the door. Now it was turned toward the freezer wall. I felt a tight knot forming in my stomach. Something was off. Something was hiding. Something wanted me to stop looking. This was not just a body. This was a message. The warm body was only the beginning. After that night, something changed in the rhythm of the morgue. Bodies kept coming in one after another, almost like someone had opened a hidden door that never closed again. Organs were missing, not damaged or infected. Missing, clean cuts, empty spaces where something important should have been. Kidneys gone, liver gone. Sometimes the heart is gone just like the first body, and every time I checked the tag, the cause of death felt like a joke. Cardiac arrest, natural failure, infection. None of it matched what I was staring at. The reports were fake. I felt it in my bones. I started keeping notes in a small notebook I hid inside my locker. I wrote down the age. I wrote down the time they arrived. I wrote down the condition of the body. No one knew I was doing it. I made sure the notebook stayed tucked under my clothes before I left each morning. And as the pages filled up, a pattern began to form. A pattern that made my hands turn cold every time I wrote another line. All these people had checked into the hospital alive and stable. Their files, when I secretly glanced at them, showed simple symptoms: a fever, a minor injury, a routine checkup. Nothing that suggested they were close to death. Nothing that explained why they ended up on my table with their insides missing. The next thing I noticed was even worse. All of them had no family, no emergency contact. No one to claim the bodies. It was like someone was picking them out carefully. Someone choosing them like items on a shelf. The thought made my skin crawl because the pattern felt too intentional. I kept thinking about the same doctor who always came at night. The one with the cold voice. The one who brought in bodies with no paperwork. He had not said a word to me since that night he warned me. As more bodies arrived, I started noticing something even more disturbing. Every time a new one came in, the hospital hallways grew quieter. Staff avoided eye contact. Security guards stayed further away from the morgue door. It felt like everyone knew something was going on, but no one wanted to say it out loud. One night, while I was writing in my notebook, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I jumped so hard, the pen fell out of my hand. It was a nurse I had seen before. She always looked tired, but that night her face was pale and her hands were shaking. She leaned in close and spoke in a weak voice. "Forget what you have seen." I stared at her, waiting for an explanation. She did not give one. She said nothing else. She turned around and walked away quickly, her steps fast and uneven like she was running from something invisible. That warning haunted me more than the bodies, because she was not talking to a doctor, not to a police officer, not even to another nurse. She was warning a janitor. Someone like me should not have been a threat, unless I had seen something I was never supposed to see. That night, as I cleaned the metal tables, I kept feeling like someone was standing right behind me, breathing down my neck, watching every move I made. The night started like any other, cold and quiet, but the silence was broken by a scream, a sharp, terrified sound that cut through the hallways like a knife. It was the nurse, the one who had whispered a warning to me before. My stomach dropped, and my heart started pounding like a drum in my chest. I ran toward the noise without thinking, my legs moving faster than my mind could process. When I turned the corner, I saw something I could never unsee. The doctor was dragging her unconscious body down the hallway. Her uniform was torn. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. I lunged forward, hoping to grab him. He stopped for a second, looked at me and leaned down close. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You clean the dead, not the living. Walk away or else." My knees went weak. My hands shook uncontrollably. I wanted to argue, to fight, but I couldn't. I stepped back and hid behind a nearby cart. I held my breath, listening. Then I heard it. The sound of cutting, metal against skin. Soft, precise, almost methodical. It came from the basement restricted room the doctor had dragged her toward. The smell hit me next. Iron, burning flesh. I crouched lower, pressing myself against the wall. Every second stretched like hours. My mind raced. I could call for help. I could run. But something inside told me that no one would hear me. No one would come. This hospital had secrets darker than anything I had imagined. Hours passed in a blur of fear. I kept peeking toward the basement door. Finally, I heard the quiet roll of a stretcher being moved. The sound made my heart stop. Slowly, I crept toward the morgue. There, lying on the metal table, was the nurse. My eyes filled with horror. Her chest had been opened. Her organs were missing. I froze, staring at her pale face. The blood was fresh. The stitched cuts were neat, precise. And that's when it hit me. I was no longer just a witness. Every body I had cleaned, every bag I had zipped, every metal table I had wiped had been part of this system. I had unknowingly helped cover up murders. My mind spun in disbelief and fear. I wanted to leave, but even the act of stepping backward felt like stepping into a trap. The morgue was no longer a place of work. It was a place of crime, and I was trapped in the middle. The nurse's eyes were half open. It was like she was looking at me, pleading, but too weak to speak. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the doctor would return. I knew the work I had done so far had already been noticed. I had to survive. I had to escape. But more than anything, I realized that night that the hospital had no rules for the living, only the dead and those who cleaned them. My job had become more dangerous than I could have imagined. That night changed everything. I was no longer just a janitor. I was part of a secret that could kill me, and I was terrified of what would come next. Before she died, the nurse caught my wrist in the hallway. Her hand was trembling. She pressed something cold into my palm, a key. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said, "If anything happens to me, use this. Don't let him find out you have it." The echo of her warning bounced in my mind. I looked at the key in my pocket. I knew if I didn't act now, I might never get another chance. All I knew was that I had to see what was really happening in that basement. He always kept locked. Curiosity and terror warred inside me. The stairs were narrow and smelled of mold. It smelled of chemicals and old blood, a combination that made me gag. The room inside was worse than anything I had imagined. It looked like an abandoned surgical theater. Blood stained the floor in dark pools, and the walls were dotted with splatters, some fresh, some old. Coolers lined the walls. I opened one carefully, my stomach twisting as I saw the neatly packed organs inside. Kidneys, livers, hearts, all wrapped and labeled. A generator hummed loudly in the corner, powering surgical lights and equipment that shouldn't have been running in a room no one used. My hand trembled as I realized the horror of it all. Cameras were mounted in corners, their lenses glinting in the flashlight beam. I realized with a cold shock that every surgery in this hidden room had been recorded. Someone had been documenting every step of this operation. Someone was watching everything happen. Then I saw the documents. Papers stacked on a table, lists of patient names with numbers beside them. Prices, hundreds of thousands, for organs I had seen being removed from bodies earlier that week. My mind spun. The hospital was selling human organs to private buyers. I had been cleaning tables that were part of a black market operation without knowing it. A cooler in the far corner caught my eye. I opened it slowly, trying not to breathe too loudly. Inside were photographs. Photos of me at work, photos of me cleaning the morgue. Someone had been watching me the whole time, documenting me just like they had documented every other patient. Panic gripped me. Then I found another list, one that froze my blood. My name was on it, highlighted, marked as approved donor. I was next. Everything made sense suddenly. The doctor's cold look, the nurse's warnings, the strange way bodies were selected. They weren't just killing patients. They had a system, a plan, and I was already part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. Backed away slowly, my mind racing. Every step I took made the floorboards creak. I imagined cameras catching my every move. Someone knew I was there. Someone always knew. My chest felt tight, my head dizzy. This room was not just a secret. It was a trap. As I glanced at the photos again, I noticed something I had missed. Faces of other janitors, other staff. None of them were still employed. The hospital didn't just harvest organs. It erased anyone who got too close. And in that moment, I understood the truth that would haunt me forever. The hospital never let anyone leave once they knew too much, and I was already on their list. A soft, strained voice made me freeze. "Please, help me," it whispered. I had already seen horrors, but hearing a living person begging for help made it different, real, immediate. I found him on a metal table in the far corner. Straps held him down tightly. He was alive. His chest was partly open. His eyes were wide, filled with pain and fear, and he tried to speak again. I keep the others alive until he gets a buyer. Please, save me." My stomach turned. My mind screamed at me to stop, but I couldn't. I had to try. I worked quickly, trying to loosen the belts without making a sound. Sweat ran down my face. I was afraid of the doctor, afraid of what would happen if he returned, but more afraid of leaving this man to die. Suddenly, the basement door opened. The doctor appeared. Calm, controlled. The low hum of the generator made his shadow stretch across the room like a specter. He caught me instantly. "You were never supposed to see this room." The weight of what he said pressed down on me. I realized the nurse's warnings. She had tried to stop it. She had failed. And I had just walked into the same trap. I tried to step back, to run, but his presence blocked every exit. I looked at the man on the table, still gasping, still alive but weak. I could not leave him here, but I could not face the doctor either. The doctor stepped closer, a surgical knife in his hand. "You think you can save him?" he asked softly. "This is not a hospital anymore. This is a business that does not forgive mistakes." I stared at the patient, then at the doctor. My mind raced for options, for escape. But deep down, I knew the rules had changed. I was no longer a janitor cleaning tables. I was part of the story now. I understood this in that moment, that seeing the secret was only the beginning. Surviving it would be something else entirely. I ran, every step echoing in the empty corridors. My heart was in my throat. Every turn I took felt like it led me closer to the end. I dashed past rooms, past carts, past tables I had cleaned 1,000 times, hoping the darkness would hide me. Survival felt impossible, but I had no choice. Finally, I reached the emergency stairwell and ran down as fast as I could. My legs burned, lungs screaming for air. Every door might hide him waiting. When I reached the parking area, I ran at the maximum speed. I was running for my life. I am speaking to you now from a place you will never find. A safe place for now. My hands are shaking, my heart is racing, and every sound makes me jump. I am terrified. The hospital is still running. The operation has not stopped. People are still being chosen. Bodies are still arriving, and no one outside will ever know. I warn you, never trust a quiet hospital. I decided to speak now because I received a message tonight from an unknown number. My phone buzzed in the dark, and I froze. A single image appeared. A photo of me, taken last night. My hands froze over the screen. They knew where I was. They had been watching me just as they watched everyone else. I thought hiding would save me. I thought moving would protect me, but I was wrong. I cannot run anymore. They are everywhere, and they have eyes where you cannot see. I am speaking to you, sharing this confession, because someone has to know. Someone has to hear. I hear sounds outside my door. A faint click, like someone trying to unlock the door. Remember my warning. Going to hit upload before they get me. Cut to black.